Good evening and welcome to Behind the Headlines. My name is Timothy Nyangweso. Tonight we look at the budget of 2024-2025, 72.1 trillion shillings. And the theme of this budget is still the same. Maybe this third time is the time we make differences there. Full monetization of the economy, looking at agriculture, industrialization, digital transformation, most of all, market access. But today we want to dig into some of those, especially the tax, the debt, but also how did we jump from 58 to 72? That's the biggest question. We'll also be digging into some of the corruption that is in the corridors of Parliament. The 11th Parliament seems to be having more dirt than any cleanliness there. But let's meet the panel this evening. Next to me is always here Professor Sarah Sally, the Dean at the School of Women and Gender Studies at Makerere University. Good evening, Professor.
Good evening, Timothy, and good evening, our viewers.
Any anticipation for tomorrow?
I'm hopeful.
You're very hopeful?
Yes.
I'm very glad. When we're discussing finances, economics, taxation, where the budget should be or the finances of this country, we always call on him. Honorable Paul Omara, the Member of Parliament representing the people of Otuke County. Good evening, Honorable. It's good to have you.
Good evening, Timothy, and good evening, viewers. Thank you for having me.
He's always on the other side of the screen, but today he's in front of the camera. Dr. Eddie Twinenayo, who is the Executive Director of the Uganda Export Promotions Board. Good evening, Doctor, and it's good to have you.
I am happy to be here. This is my first time, especially at this time of the night. I would be at home. So being here means it is important to me. And let me mention that I've been invited for the budget tomorrow. I'll tell you, Timothy, after I have listened to the budget tomorrow.
Okay. Lastly but not least, the Commissioner General of Uganda Revenue Authority, Mr. Msinguzi John Rujochi. Good evening, sir, and it's good to have you again.
Good evening, Timothy. Good evening, dear viewers. It's nice to be back here.
It seems your year is just beginning come 1st of July.
Absolutely. As one ends, another one sets in. There's no break.
I saw you putting in the newspapers people for exemption for withholding tax.
Yes.
It was an advert in the newspapers, I think, Tuesday this week.
That's right.
Wow. So let me give some context to the discussion. Last year, promises were made. And the promise that was made is a limit to domestic borrowing to 2.2%. Also, our GDP deficit should be 5%. Next financial year, which is the coming financial year, was suggested to be at 3.5%. The East African target of deficit of GDP is 3%. How are we doing there? That's one. Two, managing consumption expenditure. No purchases of new vehicles for political leaders, public offices, travel abroad restricted to statutory functions. But we also know that there was a battle between who goes to the UN, between the Prime Minister and the Minister of Gender there. We also look at stop on additions of administrative units and also rationalization. We have assistant RDCs. Was this stopping the administration? To improve the absorption of external loans and growth, we have 14.4 trillion unutilized. Accounting officers to report quarterly projects to be designed, okay. Debt is at 48.2%, of which 33 trillion is domestic debt. External debt is 47.9. Debt should drop from 48.6 to 48.2. Is that a reality? But also borrowing should not exceed 50% and the threshold should not exceed 52.4%. But we look at it now, it's tending towards that. Corruption. Recovery by the minister last year was at this financial year that we're about to end was 3 billion shillings against 10 trillion that is lost in corruption. Are we really serious about what we're doing as a country? The biggest lion shares are going to human capital, 9.9 trillion, governance and security at 9.1 trillion, agro-industry at 1.6, that has grown by about 200 million from 1.4 trillion in 2022-2023. Infrastructure, 5.1 trillion. Private sector at 2 trillion shillings there, most of it going to UCD and UDB there. Household, that means PDM, Emyoga, all that is at 1.07 trillion, coming from 1.05 trillion shillings there. That's the promise that was made in this financial year. Let's see what the president says tomorrow, but let's dig into that conversation. Honorable Mara, sitting on the finance committee, I can only start with you. We were at 58.1 trillion shillings. A corrigenda comes into it and we jump to 72 trillion shillings, almost 14 trillion shillings there. When we look at what our expenditure is as a country, especially, 72 trillion, the biggest part is going to debt. I mean, 34 trillion is going to debt.
Yeah.
How did we come from 58 to 72? And what's the rationale behind it?
Thank you very much, Timothy, and viewers. You know, the budget adjustments, has been going on for quite a while, but it is stabilized at 58 trillion. So as the Committee of Budget, our responsibility is supposed to analyze, do harmonization and consolidation of the budget from the various sectoral committees of Parliament. So as we received the reports of the sectoral committees and we analyzed them and listened to their recommendations and we did the consolidation, the unfunded priorities, that is means the money that the key sectors from various MDAs and ministries that the stewards feel are very important that should be funded, but money was not provided for. When we total that figure, it came to almost 100 trillion shillings. So your budget is 58. Your unfunded is much higher, doubling the budget ceiling. And so normally what happens is there is a conversation that happens between Parliament and the executive in terms of what is it that should be included. And remember, the president is the only person that can provide a budget ceiling for the country. Parliament does not have that mandate. So you find those who did not receive money in some of the key sectors, they don't only talk to Parliament, they also go and lobby and talk back through the various ministries to the president. Like, for example, the traditional leaders, for example, their money was not there. So 30 billion was provided for traditional leaders. For us, there was no provision, there was no money for it. And the president felt it's essential that they should come in. If you look at Akibwa Stadium, which is very close to my heart and to the hearts of the people of Lango, was amongst the unfunded priority. That's 100 billion shillings. It had to be taken care of in the core agenda. So the president, by listening to some of the concerns raised through the various sectoral committees and through the budget committee, decided now to adjust, to accommodate the needs of the people, spoken through the various committees of Parliament to the budget committee. They decided to make the adjustment from 58 to 72 trillion. And of course, the danger is there. The danger is that our good dear friend on the left, the Commissioner General of the Uganda Revenue Authority, has a big challenge. Because if you remember, and to his credit, the tax collection has been growing by a factor of 3 trillion almost every financial year. So that jump has been going. We were very small. I think he will explain later on where now we should now be about 14% tax to GDP ratio. So as much as in this financial year, we ask of him to focus 29.7 trillion. 29 trillion. Next year now we want him to give us 31, almost 32 trillion. And yet the demand of the country is at 72. And so, Timothy, and to the viewers, then how do you fund the gap? I think that's the big challenge. So we are not going to, we have given him some of the tools to do the job, to collect more money, but he can only get for us 31 trillion. Then the rest, where we said we will not go. Remember, we said we will not borrow domestically and foreign. We will try now to minimize borrowing. We had to aggressively expand our borrowing, yardstick, really. So now domestic borrowing has to go up, and also a modicum of foreign debt will have to go up. And so we are in a catch-22 situation. So my projection, and I've always been on this one, that without oil coming very soon, I don't think the Commissioner General will be able to sustain a growing budget limit. You know, we can't go from 72 trillion the next financial year, then we go to 100 trillion, and we expect him to generate that money and for us to continue borrowing. It's not possible. But let me also say that in our Charter for Fiscal Responsibility, which is basically a 5-year projection that we do, we approve it for a 5-year period. We had projected that we will go, our debt to GDP ratio would go up to 56% of tax to GDP ratio, would come back below 50 by the 5th year. Now, if you look at the numbers, our debt to GDP, GDP ratio is still at 48, 49%. But also that does not give us the full picture, because you will actually find that the contingent liabilities are not put there, are not considered. You will find that domestic, what do we call it, the arrears, which is the 10 trillion arrears, is not included there. The deep hole in Bank of Uganda, which require refinancing, which at one time moved up to 7 trillion, is not included. So that is basically an academic reference point. But I think the bigger picture is that we must get serious. We must deal with our arrears, which is basically to the private sector. Now people are having their businesses foreclosed by banks because government, which is the biggest recipient of goods and services, have not been able to pay them. So the Secretary to the Treasury would say, I have only done an audit. What I've done, the audit which I have, is only maybe 3.7 trillion.
Okay.
While we are looking at 10, but you have only provided 200 billion. So when do you pay even the 3 trillion? When do you pay it if you're only providing 200 billion? So that's a challenge.
We have been joined by Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi, representing the people of Butambala County, and also the Shadow Minister, former Shadow Minister of Finance, but also the Chairman of PAC.
Yes, you're right.
Let me let him catch his breath so that I can come back.
Chairman of many things,
Chairman.
including the Uganda caucus.
Wonderful. Professor, let me come to you. Hearing Honorable Omara talking about 58, how they jumped to 72 to accommodate what was between the 100 trillion there, unfunded priorities, but also looking at the debt where we have it there. What is this budget responding to? It has the same theme, full monetization, for the 3rd time, same areas, agriculture, industrialization, digital transformation, market access. What is it responding to?
Yeah, thank you, Timothy. I think the budget is trying to respond to the needs of the society as it perceives it. But I think they're in a catch-22 situation that we have had increased population, there's increased need, especially on social services. So as a state, it wants to be perceived to be providing certain basics, but then we have not had much in terms of economic growth that matches with the level of the growth of the population and its needs. We are living in a digital era where things like internet have suddenly become a right, And people watch these things, and there are some basic minimums the population expects. So the government is trying to respond by providing those basic minimums. But the truth is that the economy is not big enough to be carrying those basic minimums. And that's why when anything like that happens, as you said, the budget initially was 52 trillion. And through the appropriations bill, it increased because everyone lobbied and everyone's case looked like it was a wonderful case. And that's how we come to be where we are. And then you also need to observe that running a government is not just a financial matter. I know it all boils down to finances, but it is also a political process, okay? So you have to ensure people feel they are settled, people feel they belong, people feel they have been considered. And maybe that's why when people run around and go, for example, religious leaders say we were left out, that has taken place. But beyond that, you know, as the government is trying to meet the needs, it is also trying to ensure it grows the means of production. And a lot of what is in the budget is really going into infrastructure development. So the government finds itself in a situation where it can't say, let me pose the needs of the people as we do infrastructure development to boost the economy to the level that we want to get it. And then, of course, minding the other people's needs means that there must be a shortfall on this side. And as I said, we are so unfortunate that most of what is generated as tax to run this country is in the Kampala-Wakiso area. But the country is much bigger than Kampala-Wakiso. So at the end of the day, the people who are peripheral, if people are in Yumbe, people are in Amolata, they are not going to say, because for us we didn't generate as much tax as Kampala-Wakiso, we don't deserve a hospital. They will need the hospital, they will need the medicines, they will need the UPE schools. That means it goes with teachers, it goes with human resource. So it is a challenge of balancing aspirations of the people and the capacity to meet those aspirations.
Where is the place for us to live within our means?
I think we are living within our means. Of course, there are other challenges Honorable Mara has spoken about, or I think you yourself spoke about. Of course, there's a general feeling that people are not living within their means. But we need to distinguish whether these are actually personal expenditures or personal money pilfered from state resources. But otherwise, I think the government is even struggling to meet basics within its means. So it's not that they are living beyond their means. I think they are living within their means. But because we are a very poor country, certain aspirations look like they are exaggerations and they are luxuries. So and we don't want to reach a state where one day we are told things like internet are not a basic right. What's the basic right is to fight malaria. Where we are told diagnostics are not a basic right, because as long as you have malaria, pneumonia, and whatever. So I think we should be careful with when we say we are not living within our means, because actually it's basic minimums provided. But as I said, it's a challenge of high population growth, a very youthful and dependent population, and households that are not producing much. And that's why you have the theme of monetization, with the assumption that if you can get people into a monetized situation, then they can spend more. And when they spend more, then that can be taxed. For example, if you have people who are simply minding themselves as peasants, there's not much to collect in terms of taxation. But if there is some kind of industry for them to participate and earn and demand certain services and spend on those services, even if it's something as simple as buying a soda or a beer, it has been taxed. So they will be generated into a tax. But as long as they survive on basic peasantry, well, they are surviving. They will be given services, but they are not necessarily paying taxes.
And we're going to come to some of those details here. Allow me go to the Commissioner General. When I see 32 trillion, this financial year 29 trillion, the one before 25.5, what is the strategy, especially to collect these domestic taxes, to hit the target of 32 trillion?
Thank you. Thank you, Timothy. It's true. The target of domestic revenue mobilization increases every year. But as Honorable Mara rightly said, our tax to GDP is still 14. We've just gotten 14. And yet, world over, for any nation to develop, you must be collecting at least 20% of your GDP. So that means that for Uganda to seriously take off with development, there is still room for growth of our domestic revenue. And your question is spot on. What must we do to increase our domestic revenues? Number one, our taxation has been built on a principle of voluntary compliance. When you're paying us tax as a business, UBC, we trust you to assess yourself and tell us, I've made so much money and I'm paying this much tax on the money I've made. The same applies to all other business entities. So there's an element, a fundamental principle of trust and self-assessment for people to voluntarily pay tax. But we've been stagnant for almost the last 30 years, collecting between 10 and 12% of our GDP. So one of the improvements that we're bringing on board is to now use technology so that on top of trusting you, we have some capacity to verify that actually what you declare as your income is truly your income, and therefore you're paying your fair share of tax. The other beauty of technology is that it leaves a digital trail. When you deal with Msinguzi, and tomorrow you deal with Honorable Mara, and the next day you deal with Professor, there is a trail. That trail can also help us show who else is playing what role in the economy that may not be on our tax register. Take an example, we have only about 4 million taxpayers on our tax register. That is not to mention that most of those are individuals who contribute a direct tax called pay as you earn. We have less than 300 businesses on our tax register. We have less than 40,000 taxpayers on our VAT register. Value added tax is paid by those businesses that turn over more than 150 million Uganda shillings per annum. Why, me, Commissioner General, and my entire team, we've got to rely on the integrity of our taxpayers to say that at the end of the year, I have sold more than 150. But it can't be true that we have only about 30,000 businesses that sell more than 150 million. On a daily, that is sales of about 410,000 Uganda shillings. So, critical in improving our tax to GDP, in improving our domestic revenue mobilization, is the adoption to use technologies. They are modern technologies. IFRIS is one of them. You referred to it. It's one of those things that have brought a storm in a cup.
It's a cup.
It's amazing that people can stand on their two legs and they say, we don't want IFRIS. But probably it's because of limited knowledge. So we are sharing out and explaining the benefits of IFRIS. It's very good for you as a taxpayer. It will help you not to be overassessed by the taxman. It will help you to be refunded when your refunds are due. It will help you to manage your stock when you're out of your business. It will help you level the playing field. Everybody on it will pay a fair share of tax. So there are so many benefits. No one should reject IFRIS. There are other technologies, DTS, rental property tax systems. We are now adopting technology and use of data to drive us, and we are seeing tremendous revelations.
And that's where my question is twofold to you. How feasible is the raising of 32 trillion? One, but also the depth of penetration of digital across the country. Because when I look at some of your numbers, payee in the last few years has had a high increase there.
That's right.
Especially employment in the private sector, and that has shown an improvement in domestic taxes.
Correct.
But it shows more tax deepening than widening.
No, actually, I don't think for payee we have deepened because the tax rates have not increased. At least the honorable members of parliament are here. We've not revisited the rate of pay as you earn. We've just expanded the register. That's where the growth is. As we use technology, we are able to pick how many employees are employed where, and each one contributes. So that is expanding the tax base, the tax register. We need to do the same when we effectively monitor VAT through IFRIS. We need to do the same when we effectively deploy digital tracking solution for local excise duty. There are many solutions that will help us. When we integrate systems, when our systems begin to communicate and speak to other systems of government, speak with IFMIS for government payment systems, speak with the local government systems, ELOG-REV, speak to the systems of NSSF, URSBA. We share a wealth of information which will help us expand our base. So, and I really want to emphasize the fact that for the last 4 years, I think, Parliament has really not passed major laws that increase the tax rate. I think the only exception would be the little addition on fuel this year. But last year, the year before, the other year, nothing like increasing the tax rate. So therefore, the solution is not in deepening or increasing the tax rate, it is in widening the tax base.
The tax has been paid by a factor of 10%.
Absolutely. In fact, when we widen the tax base, what will happen? Parliament will start thinking about reducing some tax rates. I've seen it work for many countries of the world. The moment you have full compliance and full automation that monitors businesses, then you can reduce the corporation tax, which is 30%. Some countries like Northern Ireland have reduced it now to about 18%. Some up to 10%. And many investors of the world are dashing there because the Googles of this world will want to invest here if you're going to charge them what they pay in their home nations. So I think there is a benefit in expanding the base rather than increasing the tax rates. But while we're at it now, can we afford to reduce the tax rates when the tax base is still this narrow? I think it would be dangerous. Because even with the current rates, we are only going to finance about 50% of the budget, 53% this year.
Okay. Let me come to Dr. Eli. Doctor, especially being an economist, and also this is an area you play in, the imports, the exports of this country, before we get there, when you hear full monetization of the economy, what does this mean?
Thank you very much, but I want to begin from another small background, that the budget is a tool, and plays two parts. One part of the tool is it is an economic tool. The second part is a political tool. And that's why my brother, Honorable Mara, was talking. All he was telling you is that as you think of the budget, you never forget that it is a political tool. But also it is an economic tool, and you have to marry both. So when you look at the total budget, you at the mind know that it is trying to achieve two objectives, the economics and the politics. Then what I wanted to say before I come to that one is that look at the areas where money has been allocated, big money, agro-industry, private sector development, infrastructure, human capital development, and other aspects.
Security.
And security and governance. These are important areas, in my view, that will help to decentralize GDP out of Kampala and Mukono. Because you know, around 63% now, I can get corrected, of total non-agriculture GDP is concentrated at the center in Kampala and
100 square miles.
And Wakiso. 100 square miles.
Yes.
This cannot continue. This economy, this country will never grow if we live over 60% of GDP in only 100 square miles
Of Kampala.
With our planning and all we have to do, we must decentralize. Then tax collection. Again, in my view, even maybe sometimes in some areas of tax, it comes to 70%, 60-70%, is also concentrated in Omara's radius. No economy will get out of poverty by concentrating their GDP over a population of 10 to 20% only and in one location. We must decentralize, we must diversify this economy, we must monetize and commercialize the economy, we must bring more people into the monetized economy. And then, Timothy, that's when I come in to tell you that if you don't produce for the market, most of Ugandans, even those we think that are outside of the Nkora Rubutos, those who work for their stomachs, actually are inside. They are transhumant. Sometimes they are in the market economy, another time they are back to the non-monetized economy. And this we must reduce. Because then, Timothy, you are looking at a situation, you know, developed countries over time, they begin with high tax rates, actually very high tax rates. Towards the end, they begin reducing after they have been efficient and effective.
You find them at
in
45% tax
yes,
GDP.
yes, tax GDP, and for PIT and CIT, personal income tax, which you call in this country PAYE, and CIT, corporate income tax, they pay a lot. I know some people complain that the taxes are high here. They are not that high. The only challenge we have is that the taxman has a narrow base from which to collect taxes. After all, GDP is concentrated in the radius of Omala. So efforts must be put at production that is market-oriented, whereby people produce for the market and sell in this market, and the other balance we export it.
But
and that's when we make
Doctor,
money.
even just speaking from what the president has said, you seem to say that it's at the center and yet the peripheral areas have nothing. But he has talked about surpluses, both in milk, in coffee, in all these things. So when you say bring them into the money economy, what is failing? Is it our priorities? Is it where we're putting our money? Where is the problem to fail to get this economy fully monetized?
You know, Timothy, an economy is like a body. Not all the parts of the body, but they grow at the same time. One, for you to make sure that you reach all the parts of the country with development, with reducing poverty, you begin by people not being scared to live in their own homes. You begin by securing the borders. You begin by assuring people that they can live tomorrow. People in Gaza now cannot contribute to GDP. So I look at this, that the government began by, first of all, saying people, you can be secure and you can be hoping to live, you can live within your borders. So you begin to do that. Then you begin putting infrastructure. China began by putting roads even in rural areas where there were no people, no industries, and then eventually people went in and developed. So it is a stage model that we began by assuring people that they live tomorrow. Human development index has improved. Infant mortality, child mortality, the female mother mortality have reduced. So now you begin, and I cannot blame that the higher non-agriculture GDP was at the center, because then we felt more safe at the center, we felt more protected at the center. But as the economy is stable and security is widespread, then I go to Otuke and you know, Mara's constituency. Then I establish a market information center. I begin training women in shea butter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Honorable Chivumbi, let me come to you. You have been in the media, especially your park committee, especially holding different sectors of the government accountable. When you look at this budget, I have been on the ground moving around today and yesterday. Ordinary Ugandans are concerned. I could use the word worried. How can they respond to a budget of 72 trillion, where the Commissioner General and his team will be coming for 32 trillion of that money? and what tells us that this is the money we need to collect from the people? Are they ready with that money in their pockets?
Let me first. I have a challenge with the elites in this country, and they never fail to disappoint me. Especially those that are well schooled than I am. And I sometimes listen to very eminent economists, and all I go home, I lose confidence.
Is that politics?
It's not politics. It's not politics, because this country needs to start a very difficult conversation. And we need to start it somewhere. And it will be a very patriotic discussion. The talk of 72 in real terms is a joke.
Why?
Since Uganda became a nation, our actual performance, and I've looked at these figures, actual revenue, I mean actual revenues, money he has collected from domestic revenue, the borrowings, the grant, the actual money we have ever gotten is 44.8 trillion. So all
Is that in a single financial year?
No. When I go to actual, the actual amount of money.
Borrowed.
No, actual amount of money realized and spent. When we go to actual, and these figures are by Accountant General and Auditor General. Since we have ever been a country called Uganda, we've never exceeded 45 trillion. So the whole talk of 52, 48, 72 is for academic purposes. And I listen to very eminent economists, including my friend Omara here. That's why you must start. Realistically, in the home, you know your own personal income. You know, at the end of the day, when my wife, my farm, even if after collecting all that money, our monthly income is 10 million. Then how do you say you are going to spend 30? You must be crazy. You must be, if you are not a miracle performer, then you are a very...
But if that expenditure is on your children's fees in Makerere, you take a loan.
Figures, and I'll tell you where you are getting wrong.
Yes.
So as a country, that's why do we have a realistic budget that we can all analyze? 5 years ago, 3 years ago, around 2021, I wrote a minority report. Because by that time, the domestic borrowing was increasing. I'd looked at the projections of revenues. They were projecting to increase the way they have increased, by the way. They've done a good job. Then I said, can we pause our expenditure to where we are? Don't even stress, cause a distress to any other sector.
While URA increases the revenue.
While URA increases the revenue.
Yeah.
Pause your expenditure. Spend at the level you are on for 4 years and clear the domestic debt. You will have a relief by that time, a net yield of 7 trillion. If you had cleared the debt by that time.
Can do it, your domestic refinancing.
Domestic refinancing.
You clear it.
You clear the domestic refinance, this debt rollover.
Yes.
Because that is where the biggest challenge is. It's taking away all the money, all our net revenue earnings, where he's going to do infamous and blah, 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 is being consumed by us borrowing to pay debt, which is not productive. That's the biggest animal we have. It's not even external borrowing. Because external borrowing is project support. Most of it is tied. I have issues with its performance. But the question is, for it, it's targeted.
That's where you and I agree.
Yeah, so, and I mean,
Regardless of the political shades.
until this country engages soberly at that level. Okay? And I've seen, that's why I'm saying, is this the conversation, the PSSTs engendering, is what I listen, it's not that. Then, so for me, he will collect that something. By the way, he's been performing near the target.
No, it's done well, regardless of
they've been falling. And these figures have been impressively rising. From 5 years ago to 19 trillion to now, that's a tremendous. But what is also worrying is that Ugandans are paying more tax, having now less discretionary
expenditure.
You are paying more and having less. Are we addressing that? Where you are collecting more taxes from us, yet there is little money to use on the things talked about, water, energy, blah, blah. That's why today, even a flagship thing of this term of the presidency, which is the partial development model, as we speak now, each parish in Uganda has only received 50 million. And we have few days to the end of a financial year. If you can't finance the parish development model, it is half. The other day, I had a conversation because I didn't know until I went to the constituency. And I had the far cry from villagers. Oh, we have only 50 million. We haven't even accessed it for a whole year. Then I engaged someone from finance this morning. Said, but is that true? To verify. He said, yes, but we are going to pay. He said, you are paying a few days to a month to another financial year. It's because they don't have money for development. I've looked at agencies, okay? For the year of audit, I've looked at it. They had a wage, no recurrent, no development. Many agencies, you are going to pay them wage, they're not going to work. They're not going to produce. Then the biggest tragedy, even where you have the money, you have no absorption capacity. You are sitting on a 14 trillion and dispersed.
That's it now incompetence of the ones who are...
Yes, you are sitting on a 14 trillion, money borrowed, and not dispersed. And we are paying interest. It is consuming his money. That is 14. Now, I looked at the numbers of the dispersed and not utilized, both on dollar account and on shilling account of government. The numbers will amaze you.
So we're sleeping on the job.
Therefore, are we having this conversation during the budget process? The cry has been that when we get oil, we'll sort these ones out. But do you know at present you are carry forward? He knows. We have hit 10 trillion. Dollar, 20 trillion. 20, to have hit $10 billion. 98, I saw 98 figure, and that is for the last financial year I'm looking at, not this one, which is about now 38 trillion. Of our money is in the carry forwards in the oil sector. So you may not have money.
But
to the extent, let me tell you, to the extent...
we have the ECOP
no,
law,
let me tell you about ECOP. He knows. The ECOP investment I've looked at the other day, I was with UNOC in finance. You needed only 647 billion to invest in Kampala storage facility. You have no money, zero. What has happened? Where you had envisaged to own 51% in a strategic investment. Vital is telling you we will financing 100% and you own zero. Even in the bulk purchase of fuel, where you needed, and I'm telling you, where you needed 144 billion.
But Honorable, we have been providing money for UNOC.
No.
For our
I've
equity
looked-
investments.
I've looked at those numbers. That's why I'm saying I listened to this debate of elite and I say, okay, they are daydreamers. And with due respect, professors from university on my TV set, I listen to you and say, but do these people know the country they are talking about? For example, I'll give you something that will interest you. During COVID, we expensively acquired, because a healthy population is the one that will produce, is the one that will give you revenue. We bought ICU, he knows. It was through a budget process where we allocated money, cut it from other sectors. Every single referral hospital, we bought ICU beds, including Mulago. Now, not a single referral hospital in Uganda has a functional ICU bed. Not a single one. Now, even in Mulago Hospital, which we allocated 40 beds, they are only operating 12. 10 are in a hall where one, they are saying they lack nurses, they lack enough doctors, they lack reagents to operate them. This is the country you talk about. Now, do I see these priorities in the budget process? No. He knows that the biggest driver of the 78 is the budget which this country has not seen.
3%.
Is the one that will be financed only 3%. And is going to receive the first call on July. Now, that one, we have not even looked at it on the period. We have a glimpse of what it is. You are going to give Amina another 500. You are going to give Amina, and his money will collect in the first and second quarter. Is all going to be observed by the 3%, not going to priorities. Therefore, for me, I look at and you are busy financing Smania, the pharmacy.
Just a second, Honorable. Let him finish.
You will provide a response, which is, I know, will be academic, but not realistic. Now, I've been in a budget committee for 7 years, for almost all my parliamentary life. Now I have an opportunity to look at, we've worked, when we, the park. This year when we made the chart of fiscal responsibility, we gave URA, we did two important things. We gave URA to raise tax to GDP ratio to 16, for which they are now, because it was 13, they are now moving at 14. Give them credit. But we said, let's fix expenditure and peg it to net revenue increase. If you are going to increase any expenditure of government, it should be on the net revenue increase. What are we doing? We are spending money. For example, I'll give an institution like Parliament. In just the last 3 years, the budget has gone from 600 to 1 trillion.
Okay.
I'm just giving you one institution. 600 to an institution. And do you know what happens? Institutions that get a one-off, you are going to have Commonwealth, you are going to have those conferences, one-off. After that conference, they rationalize that money in the base and remain with it to use it for other things. So you've been ballooning the budget for things that are not essential. Therefore, this budget of this year, the actual budget I would want country to debate, for me, is the 3%. I want to look at what is going to be on the 3%, because that's where you are paying for things like the deemed energy. You may not know what deemed energy is. Eh? For us, we know what deemed energy is. That's where you are going to pay ATIAC. That's where you are going to pay. No, deemed energy is not ATIAC. It's the energy in our power mix that we need from these generators in case you get a problem. But here you are paying deemed energy, but you cannot evacuate the energy the energy you are producing, and you are paying for it.
Okay.
So for me, as I finalize on the question of a budget, until we sit as a country and have a realistic discussion, both in Parliament, and they've done a good job, URA, by the way. We gave them 98 billion. Some few years was not yet a commissioner. Said, increase your capacity, give us a yield. They promised to do so. They've done so. But the politician and these other civil servants who are indisciplined, they are increasing their budget for the money they don't have.
Yes.
This is a very honest debate from my brother here. I know we can agree ideologically, but what he's saying is, I think, is a straitjacket budgeting discipline. If you look at this budget, the statutory expenditure is 37 trillion. That takes into account our debt as well. Mm-hmm. So 37 trillion. That one, we don't even have a say, we don't touch it. What we supplied as Parliament is 34 trillion. So if you add the two, you're going to get into 72 trillion. Mm-hmm. So what
minus
this...
of wage.
Yeah, so,
yes,
so this...
That figure is misleading. No of wage.
Can you had your say. So what you supply is basically a very small amount of money, 34. So this figure might look 72 trillion, but you're only supplying what we are able to distribute for Ugandans to use is only 34. The other one is statutory. It must go going towards debt now, like the debt servicing has gone to 34. I think the most important thing, which I think he has raised, and for me and him, we have had this debate where we say, if you kind of stay your expenditure in this financial year at 50, let's say 52.7 trillion, like this one, then even as revenue is increasing, because there is this animal called debt rollovers. Now, if your revenue is growing, the Commissioner General is increasing revenue, you stay your expenditure, it means you will have, your fiscal space will widen. And then you'll use that money to settle your domestic debt rollovers. And then you'll, year on year, you'll have more fiscal space. And so the damning animal eating away our money is basically debt rollovers. And so are we willing to have that tough conversation to say, can we now stop? Let's settle these debt rollovers? Because basically you borrowed, in treasury bill is a 1 year animal. So you borrow from the market for 1 year and that debt falls due. Now you don't have money to pay it. Basically you don't have money. You're defaulting on debt. You have to go to the market again, you refinance it. So it is basically, it's baloney. We just need to reach a point and stop that and say, can we stop? And it requires discipline. The second one, which you talked about, is the incompetence in our public service, in the leaderships that we have. How can we borrow money and we have it staying redundant, earning interest, and we have no capacity to use it? And that, again, the interest is going to eat into the revenue that the Commissioner General is collecting. Okay. So the level of incompetence, I like, and corruption as well.
We're going to come to that one.
So if they say if you sleep with the dogs,
with fleas,
you don't complain when you have the fleas. So if you hire incompetent people to work for you and they don't execute, and the population suffer because of them, don't expect to have anything grand.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Finally, before we take a break, Professor, let me come to you. The President keeps talking about the knowledge economy, But fortunately, human capital seems to be receiving the highest here. But then when we come down to the detail, the capitation grant, how much a child is given in UPE to be able to get something to eat, it is ironic what he's saying and what actually is on paper to be received in a school. How do we create that knowledge economy that he keeps talking about, especially with the imbalance in between? Because human capital has health, has education, has what, all those things incapacitated in that. How do we get this irony away?
Yes, thank you, Timothy. I think it is also maybe not fair to assess human capital just from what's happening in UPE schools, okay? So when you talk about human capital as health, education, and skills development, there's a lot that the government is doing at different angles, plus also the private sector. So if you can see, there's been a growth in the post-secondary institutions, many of them public, but also many of them private, to deal with the skills gap, especially now when people are thinking that university education is not enough. But if we also look at that human capital thing, which is 26.3%, I think, this year of the budget, there are also things like developing Bunyoro University, Busoga University. So all that is part of the knowledge economy, the skills training, building a scientific base that people do really understand. So it is true that we have a younger population, and this younger population is largely in primary schools. And it is actually a struggle to meet every child's need. And partly, I think, is because of the decisions we took as an economy to liberalize. When we liberalized, then the assumption was that there would be a trickle down from the urban area to the rural areas. And in some instances where people have a lot of money, they have put up big schools in rural areas. But otherwise, many areas which are hard to reach remain under-resourced. The only education institution which will be the only primary school will be a government one. And it will not be in a very good state. And of course, UPE, the capitation grant will be limited. I think maybe the challenge has to be with the way UPE funds are disbursed. I know the government tries to equalize for every child in the country. But I think some of the difficult conversations we may have to have at some point is, do you need to give every child in primary level the same amount of money? Or do we say those who have gone, for example, to Kampala parents don't need that bit of UPE, in as much as they are Ugandans, so that you concentrate it where there's need? Because if you distribute it equally, you are going to end up giving money to those who don't need it, while denying it to those who would have needed more. So we are just unfortunate that we are not unfortunate. It is a demographic dividend, but if we can develop its human capital, it has human capital, that we have very many younger people that we have to look into. And in a way, there is some level of improvement, both government and private sector holding together, that we are having more people graduate into secondary school, more people make their way into universities, and the universities are not even enough, and that's why they are contributing more. I think, just one last thing, I think before we say whether we are making money, whether we are spending lavishly, whether we should tone down, I think there's one thing missing in all this equation: us making an economic case for the investments we make. For example, if we make an investment for opening a new university, for having an extra primary school, for having Hoima Stadium or Akibua Stadium, we can actually ably say with the economists, what do we expect to benefit from that and for how long? For example, I know the stadiums, for example, we are targeting AFCON. How much are we targeting from AFCON? And how do we sell this case? Because if we don't sell that case, it looks like lavish expenditure. Same, you can then go to these secondary schools and the primary schools, the UPE things. Let us communicate the return on investment that we expect from the investments we are making in places which actually don't look like they have an economic case. Because actually in the long term, it pays off. But in the short
case?
No, it's not just a political case. I think kids, wherever they are, must be trained. If you don't train them, you're going to have a bigger problem of an illiterate population. So give them an education, whether it's UPE, someone will find them along the way and carry them further.
That's a lot of hope there.
Yes.
Let me read some feedback coming through from some of the people. Good evening, Timothy. Thank you for hosting Dr. Eli, and we appreciate that. The budget will remain on paper as long as the priorities do not align with the aspirations of the taxpayers. It's easy with money that is stolen from the custodians and the top echelons of this country to financially plan, but failure to widen the tax base vis-a-vis deepening the budget will remain a mere plan. To feel the economic impact of this, deliberate financial impacts need to be done, like the tax, lowering of the cost of getting finances, who gets the job where, businesses. Finally, respect for local business people for the role they play. Okay, thank you very much. This is Bwango from Fort Portal. He says the budget of 2024-2025 will meet the following challenges. The government has the task to provide money for organizing 2026 elections, national IDs, construction of both Hoima and Akibwa stadiums for 2027 AFCON, serving you a huge debt. Otherwise, the solution will stand to resorting to domestic borrowing. Thank you. Last but not finally, Dennis Nwagaba from Kanungu. Thank you for the people that are there. The panel is really vital and highlighting very important and pertinent issues. Joanne says, me, I'm seeing and saying that the budget should look into the hospital bills that are too expensive. Poor people cannot afford this. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be digging into this and more.
Juko.
Yo.
Wachiko.
Check the shopping, man. What's your secret? Haven't you heard of the parish development model PDM?
Yes, I did, but I thought it was just a talk.
No, Sebatia. It is real. I and a few friends together formed a circle, accessed money from the PDM, invested in a portrait project, and now things are moving.
Juko. I thought I was one of your friends.
You are.
But you left me behind.
I didn't leave you in poverty. What you do, just visit your LC2 chairperson and your parish chief and start the process of economic transformation. Just like that. The parish development model is an initiative from the government of Uganda through the Ministry of Local Government designed to transform all lives of Ugandans for the better. PDM, my parish, my development, my life.
The Uganda National Oil Company, UNOC, is wholly owned by the government of Uganda and was established to safeguard and promote Uganda's commercial interests in the petroleum sector. UNOC has two subsidiaries, the Uganda Refinery Holding Company, URHC, which will hold a 40% stake in the 60,000 barrel per day refinery and manage the development of Kabalega Industrial Park, and the National Pipeline Company Limited, NPC, in charge of pipelines, storage, and downstream business ventures. This subsidiary holds 15% interest in the East African Crude Oil Pipeline, ECOP. ECOP is a 1,445-kilometer long pipeline that will transport crude oil through 10 districts in Uganda to the port of Tanga in Tanzania. UNOC is also actively engaged in crude oil exploration, development, and production activities, and its participation role includes a 15% stake in the Tilenga, Mwoya, and Bulisa, and Kingfisher development projects, Chikure. UNOC also holds the exploration license for Kasuruban Block in Hoima, Bulisa, and Masindi. UNOC currently owns and manages the Ginger Storage Terminal and will build a 320 million litre capacity terminal in MPG called the Kampala Storage Terminal. At UNOC, we're harnessing the potential of Uganda's petroleum resources, forging a sustainable future and preserving the natural beauty of Uganda. UNOC, your partner in Uganda's oil and gas industry.
Get ready, Uganda, this June the 13th. Join us for a pivotal moment in our nation's future. UBC TV will present the live coverage of the 72.136 trillion shillings national budget reading for the fiscal year 2024-2025. Under the theme, Full Monetization of Uganda's Economy through Commercial Agriculture, Industrialization, Expanding and Broadening Services, Digital Transformation and Market Access. Witness as our leaders outline the financial blueprint that will shape our economy and drive development in every corner of Uganda. From infrastructure to education, health to innovation, see how the new budget will impact you. Tune in to UBC TV on Thursday, June 13th from the morning hours and afternoon for exclusive, in-depth coverage of the National Budget Reading 2024-2025 live from the Kololo Ceremonial Grounds, only on UBC TV, your public broadcaster.
Quick commercial break here on Behind the Headlines. My name is Timothy Nyangweso, and you can be part of the show. Join us on our YouTube channel. Drop your comment there, or the number 0709 62 25 90 there. Let us know what you think, both by text and WhatsApp. In the studio, I have Professor Sarah Sali, Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi, Honorable Paul Omara, Dr. Eli Twineyo, and the Commissioner General of URA, Mr. Msinguzi John Rujochi, and we're discussing everything the budget of 2024-2025, 72.1 trillion shillings. Let me start with the Commissioner General. And Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi, you made me write down something that I'll come back to you that is quite interesting. The biggest challenge, especially on two ends, is I was also watching Kenya, which is also about to have a budget reading, and they have their finance bill of 2024, and there was a comment made by one of the people there and said, you know what, companies will leave Kenya and come to Uganda and then be able to export. But the tax regime is also heavy there. My question to you is twofold. One, how do you hope to limit leakage of taxation, but also two, alignment of the tax regime, ours and the region?
Okay, thank you, Timothy. First, I think for the tax regime across the region, it is work in progress. For the international trade taxes or customs taxes, we now have a common tariff. We have one law that sets the rates for the whole of East African region. Tax rates. And where a country has a need to have a different rate, it's still granted at the EAC. You must take it to Arusha and agree that for this and this reason, I want to vary the rate on this particular item, and you give your reasons. So I think that is good progress on international taxation. So as an East African region, we can now deal with all issues of international trade taxes uniformly across board. For the domestic taxes, our rates are still very comparable. I think with the exception of Kenya, the rest of the East African countries, our rate for VAT is 18%. Pay as you earn, we're in the same range. So for a number of domestic taxes, we are also at harmony. But there is a lot of work that still needs to be done to have one law that would cover the region. There is a lot of progress. However, as any new bloc that has just come together, we still have issues of self-interest as nations. This is where we step back and think about ourselves as Uganda, and the other parties also think about themselves. But to the credit of our leader, His Excellency the President, I think he's been the most committed in ensuring that there's fair play across the East Africa. You've heard him severally speak about commodities like rice. As URA, there's a time we were collecting some taxes on rice from Tanzania, and he said, stop it, this is rubbish. Instead of taxing Tanzanian rice to allow Uganda's rice to prosper, let Ugandans eat rice from Tanzania if they can't produce it competitively. And we stopped that tax. and on many other fronts. So I wish the other parties in the East African region would also play fair, so that there are no quotas on our milk exports or our sugar exports. Then it will be a fair play across the region. But I think sometimes the issue of nationalism and governments looking at themselves still as, you know, individual states rather than the East African bloc still keep cropping up. But with the ongoing work in harmonization of our domestic taxes and removal of those those tariff and non-tariff barriers, we will get to be at harmony. The only issue that remains to be done is now to measure the value addition, because sometimes these East African countries can add very small value addition on some of the imported products. You may import, for example, rice from India, and your only process, or Pakistan, and your only process is to remove the husk from it. And then you own it as your rice. So in that one, we have the rules of origin that should define. And it is the work of our revenue administrations to work and ensure that whatever we are trading across the region is actually made or produced in the region, rather than imported from far and some little value is added and then it ends up. But the law is clear. What needs to be done now is effective monitoring and implementation to make sure there is no abuse, because we also have those challenges coming up in this effort of harmonization. And ultimately, once we have the East African community fully integrated politically, then that will be history. We'll be one big trading bloc. You can produce in Dar es Salaam, you can produce in Nairobi, you can produce in Kampala. It will be one block. And I think that will be the ultimate solution. But allow me, Timothy, to mention something small on the earlier question of budget. I listened attentively. I did not have an opportunity to contribute. And I heard the comments of our leaders, Honorable Chivumbi and Honorable Omar. The issues they are raising are pertinent. There is a lot that we are spending now on debt servicing, paying of interest, not even clearing debts, but just to maintain that servicing. And I think it will take discipline across the country to overcome that challenge. Because, as mentioning that, I've had the opportunity of attending the meetings of our leaders when they are trying to appropriate this small budget. It's difficult. I mean, if it can be hectic to allocate your own income to run your family for a year, imagine allocating limited resources to run a nation for a year. When you hear the presentation of the different leaders of institutions, like the one I lead, and the government and the ministries, crying for a fair share of the cake, it is a very passionate cry, and you cannot say, you know, we will not attend to it. So it is a real challenging experience. But what I think is required for us as a nation to move forward will be to agree to have total discipline. Discipline at all levels to ensure that what we can't do now, we agree we do it later when we have capacity. I mean, COVID taught us that we can live in Uganda without traveling and still survive. So I think if we are going to say, let's stop all travels, it should be across the board. Let everybody not travel, and
so
we
who
save
whips
that
the
money.
discipline?
I'm saying discipline at all levels. MDs and institutions like myself, we can exercise discipline at that level. Parliament should, cabinet should, and everybody across the country should just say, yes, this we can do without, and let's kick it off our budget item. If it is cars, we can also say we will not die by not buying new cars for a year. If it is whatever it is, it will require consensus and harmony and discipline. It is very easy to point fingers at certain projects that probably have gone slower or have not taken off, but that's not the end of the big hole that we are in now. We must be able to exercise discipline across board, in all arms of government, in all institutions. And as citizens also, we must have expectations that are measured. We say, yes, it is good to have roads everywhere, but if we are going to clear the domestic arrears problem, or we are going to take away the issue of spending 40% of our collections on servicing debt, let's stop any new roads. So let there not be a district that is clamoring for a new administration center, or a new road, or a new something.
More members of parliament.
Or more members of parliament. We can even take very drastic decisions and we say, let's have parliament and still move the nation.
Commissioner General, staying with you, tax leakages, especially in the country, domestically there, corruption, from corruption to, you know, undercuts or assumptions made. How do we mitigate tax leakages?
Tax leakages at all levels. Now, I'll start with the side of collection. Even us who collect taxes, we have been focusing on the issue of minimizing leakages, so that what we collect, we pass it the consolidated vote. That one, at an institutional level, I think we have achieved some very significant progress. Not to say that we have sealed it off, we still get instances. But whoever wants to dare try play corruption, they know that I will either be caught and I'll lose my job, or I will even go through prosecution, or I will do an honest job if I want to stay here. And that one, I think we see increased revenue performance because of minimal leakages on our side. Once we've handed over to the consolidated vote, now Parliament should set in and ensure that there are no leakages. IGG should set in and ensure there are no leakages. DPP, whoever is responsible. And I think really the issue of corruption, there are no two ways about it. We have to be very firm and deal with it firmly. It is a painful thing. Even to have someone lose a job, it's a very painful experience. You don't know how many other people you have affected. But if we are going to cause development in our country, we need to exercise that. Hold the cane and deal with corruption firmly, so that those who are not involved will fear to get involved. And the message will be clear. And soon it will become a culture that we can run government affairs, we can run businesses without budging to the vice of corruption.
Information to Commissioner General. I think there are a couple of things which is not mentioned. One is that as Parliament, we noted that URA staff were not being paid well. And the Commissioner General made recommendations.
Correct.
For enhancement.
Yes, we supported it because some of us have lived in the corporate world.
Thank you.
You cannot pay these people peanuts and you expect them to collect 29.7 trillion. It's a joke. So that is one thing that we should continuously do. And
That's
Chief,
right.
if you feel there are gaps, come back. Secondly, tools of trade.
Yeah.
They need some
computers
and things like that.
Systems,
You know,
yes.
those things we checked at the borders.
That's right.
Which scanners.
Yes.
See those things that are escaping. So they need the tools. And also including IFRIS that people don't want at all.
That's right.
That is, IFRIS basically is a transparency tool,
Exactly.
as the Commissioner has described. So we continue to give them the tools they
of
need
trade.
to collect more taxes. Maybe one area, which is actually not his fault again, it is the law we passed on tax exemptions. There has been leakage in that thing. Me and my friend here, that's an area of agreement where now we have given tax exemption for these people. But anyway, the law allows the Minister of Finance to come to Parliament with the list for review. Now, as Parliament, I think we need to take it up to say, do these people, can they still continue to have the exemption as authorized?
Okay.
Because it's a big area of leakage.
Honorable, on the exemption,
Yes.
I have some information.
Yes,
The Honorable Minister of Finance has now set up a unit
yes,
for monitoring those tax incentives
yes,
to make sure that those that have received those exemptions and incentives
yes.
have delivered their part of the bargain.
But part of the work.
URA
yes.
is part of that committee.
Okay.
And our work has started. So on a
Fantastic.
continuous basis, we will be reporting who has used well and brought the benefit that government intended
Yes.
for renewal, and who has not, then for withdrawal.
Yes, and please let us know.
Yes, sir.
Let's know about it.
Yeah.
And we will then make the noise.
Dr. Eli, let me bring you in. One of the things about export promotion is you say you help to support the export of services and products. Your mandate is to bring linkages, market information, and also provide export markets. With our balance of trade deficit, are you really giving us value for money? And what more can you do?
The computer said garbage in, garbage out. Put your mouse where, all that English, Timothy. This morning I was addressing the ambassadors of the ring states, our ambassadors. And so we were looking at the performance of trade and exports and imports.
Yes.
Actually, when you look at imports of services and exports of merchandise and services and imports of services and merchandise, the gap is narrowing greatly, really. If you look at from 2000, we are coming up. There is a lot to be done. I am happy with the Minister of Finance and the PSST's office. They have now established, and I'm on that committee of import substitution and export promotion national strategy. Following what the President's directive on import substitution and export promotion.
Yes.
For a long time, the government has concentrated on the priority sectors of the economy, which we know, infrastructure, human capital development, and all this. But it has not focused on marketing.
Oil and gas.
Oil and gas. I had a stint in the corporate world in this country and even developed countries. You have to have a budget for business development and for marketing. It is the role of the state, my honorable members of parliament, that if you don't finance marketing of your country, the others will do it to your detriment. I can tell you at company level, whatever Coca-Cola does wrongly, it is an advantage to Pepsi-Cola. These are direct competitors. In the world, every country is competing for the existing market. And even the market that doesn't exist. And that's what I was telling the ambassadors. So we need to look for the markets, we need to produce for the markets. But if we don't market, if we don't invest in marketing, if we don't invest in marketing, I'll give you an example. Members of Parliament, you know very well when we talked about the Expo Dubai 2020.
Yes.
Did you know, the other week I saw the son of the ruler of Dubai. I said this has become his home. But do you know how it all began? Expo 2020. Myself, and I'm waiting for a medal anyways, I was the Commissioner General. The people bashed the Expo at the beginning. I worked with Ambassador Zake, Kibedi, our ambassador in UAE, Abu Dhabi,
Yes.
and some members in Foreign Affairs and some members of our agencies. Without budget support, without enough ample support, actually. But as I talk now, the UAE people will be investing more than 10 billion, I think, by end of next year.
$1 billion.
In this country. When you see the son of the ruler of Dubai coming to this country, when I was there, and of course everybody who is in higher government knows, and in our embassy, I met people from the toppest of the leadership of UAE to the lowest in MDAs. I tell you, myself and Ambassador Zake Chibedi, we have contributed to this economy over $2 billion of exports now. I was showing that by 2020 we are not even exporting 60 in actual $1 million. We are now, and every day I get people who are interested to invest and export to UAE. I get people who are buying from UAE. The next 3 years we will be in about 3 billion and above from UAE alone. You talk marketing, I have been in private sector. You talk marketing, I'm not an economist, I'm a fellow of marketing from London. I know what marketing is to a company. If marketing is important to a company, it must be important to a country. If we don't invest in marketing tourism and good image and exports, we shouldn't expect the exports to grow.
No.
As simple as that.
So when you talk about the exports growing and you talk about this marketing, you have been to Dubai, you have been to Serbia, you took coffee to Serbia. At what point do we see this translate to an ordinary Uganda? Especially, let's talk about things that are there. Coffee, milk, 3 billion liters of milk, 800 liters consumed by Ugandans, about 2.3 liters of billion liters of milk, just their surplus.
Timothy, actually the future is good. Even with little marketing by government, and even budget allocation by parliament, and later on given by finance, this country, maybe because of our strategic location and because of our friends we have made, but also because of our EAC membership and COMESA, you realize that exports are expanding. And this time it is better. When I was growing, we were exporting mainly to the EU, and they were primary agricultural products. But do you know now we even export to Europe vegetable oils and fats?
Wow.
Do you know now we've been exporting casein, which is a protein component of milk, to United States of America and India? Do you know to the region, our quality now, you cannot doubt it for manufactured products. Base metal and products, or what you call iron and steel products, we are in excess of 100 million. I showed the members of the ring states, our ambassadors, means those ambassadors who are around our country. From 1990, for example, I said, you look, 1990, we were exporting 1.67 million US dollars, million, to United Arab Emirates, and we are talking over 2 billion.
Yes.
I showed them that even within the EAC, we were net importers from Kenya
Now
of all manufactured products.
Things have changed.
You know that, not from Honorable Mwanga Chivun, but for you, and the commission is the Morocco. Crown what? Crown, is it Crown beer? Professor Sarah. Whenever people had parties in Kampala, where I have spent. The factory
was in Kisumu.
You see? And it was targeting Uganda directly.
Yes.
Now, you go to the market. What we sell domestically here are normally Ugandan products. Our manufacturing supplies our market. They are 75%, even 80% of what they produce. The balance is exported to our region. Let me tell you, we need peace in South Sudan and peace in DRC, which we share more than 750 kilometers of land. You know what that means? All these are neighbors, cross-border trade, all these are our relatives. And psychic distance tells you, and the culture that you will sell to the one you know about. The language is the same.
Yes.
If you give me peace in DRC and South Sudan, I think maybe the next day, the president will, after the next 3 years, will pick me and I become anything bigger than what I am, because this market is
a real
so
market
big.
here.
This market is there. We need to penetrate it.
But Dr. Eli, you know, what you say is very rosy, very beautiful, beautiful marketing language here. Dubai, Serbia. How does that translate to one? Because the biggest export is gold.
Yes. No,
if you look at it. If you also look at what you're talking about with deficit and import, if I look at what the president was talking about, $3.6 billion in importation, 1.6 billion in exportation. $2 billion in deficit, and you still say you are doing a good job?
Timothy, this is a very good one. Let me tell you the two principles that I hear in every country. No country will ever stop having debt. No country, even United States, has a debt. No country will ever stop importing, because you import, one of the reasons you import what you don't produce, what you produce but don't, what you don't produce but you consume. You import factory and machinery. You import intermediate goods. Until we get out our iron ore and put it in a usable, we will still import raw materials for iron and steel or base metal products, from which we get over $100 million. Medicine.
That's why the pharmaceuticals become very important.
Yes.
That's one of the reasons I supported that bill.
Yes. As long as we don't waste money and we have the right pharmaceuticals. So, Timothy, you'll never stop importing. But what would be bad, Timothy, is to import useless things. I will have one of these days a secret meeting with the Commissioner General and show him a list of those things that we need to import substitute, since I'm a member of the government committee now on import substitution and export promotion. We are importing a lot of useless products, which are even giving us a lot of emission and pollution. I see some of the smallest vehicles in this town, and I find them on highways and causing all the inconvenience. We may need to be careful on certain products, and we need to be careful because, you know, we imports take our export revenues. So we need to be sure, as we import substitute, Timothy, some of the vehicles, even new parliament, we can also, I request the Commissioner General to do what we call Pigovian taxes. They are already doing it, e.g. an environmental tax, to increase the environmental taxes on imports that pollute our environment.
Wigs?
I want you to increase it.
Honorable Mara, let me come to you.
Women will kill us.
When you look at this, when you look at this 72 trillion budget that is there, what is the cost of corruption already?
Oh my goodness. The IGG says we lose up to 10 trillion shillings annually in corruption. And corruption takes very many forms.
So generally we have 62 trillion to work with.
I think the most frustrating thing has been seeing those who don't produce anything. You know, there are people who are manufacturing. There are people who are in financial services. There are people who are doing woodwork, metal workshops. There are people who are creating something. They're in commercial agriculture. They are creating, contributing wealth. But then there is this lot of people who manufacture nothing, but they are richer than those who manufacture. Where do they get the money from? And I think this other thing which was suggested by the IGG, they call it what?
Lifestyle.
Lifestyle audit. I think we need to embark on a lifestyle audit. You need to show us, Commissioner General is here. You have this building here, which is so big. You are the owner, several apartments. Show us the taxes you have paid, your source of revenue, and how you paid for it. It's a very simple thing. I think what we need is the will to do it. Show us you have all these fleet of cars. Where did you get the money from? Recently, there was a census. I was counted, and they were asking so many questions. I don't know whether Ugandans were honest enough to tell those enumerators what they own. So I think corruption is endemic, is running away. Yeah? Is a national security risk. It frustrates those who are paying taxes to say, we don't want even to do it, because you don't see the value. Look at Kampala City. It is, I would call it a fishing village indeed. Are you proud to be in this city of Kampala?
And that's where it brings me to
so the question
Honorable.
is, yes, so that is Yesterday, I drove towards Bugolobi side. My friend, it's like you're in a war zone.
Honorable, corruption has come to the doors of Parliament.
Yeah.
And the President, during his State of the Nation's address, was clear. Whether amnesty or blood.
Yes.
Is this weeping or it's a political move by the President?
You see, when a matter is in a court of law, there is this...
Sub judice.
The law of sub judice. We can speak in general terms. I think many of us have been unhappy on the generalization around corruption. And I have always said on this platform here that the President is the #1 recipient of intelligence information on not only on national security, but on corruption. He knows who they are. He knows the corrupt. He knows those who are not corrupt. So the question is, why has he not acted? That's why when he asked the question, I said, I think we need to have amnesty. There was that uproar. He said, no. He said, you are now actually. In fact, one time we went for a caucus meeting at Entebbe. Honorable Ojia, what is his name? Ojia, yes, this one who is leading the petition, the MP from West Nile. Said last time, Your Excellency, you talked about corruption, that when we come back here, you would have arrested them. But I've come today here, you have not arrested anyone. So the President just smiled. So there have been very many accusations now that the President has been lenient on the corrupt. That's in the public domain. So when he finally, and the excuse that he has always given is that I don't have evidence. That you people, you know, you give me the thing and I will act. So when he finally said, this thing has been happening from Ministry of Finance through the MDS to Parliament, and I have evidence, then we said, okay, so finally he has it. And now me, I was waiting to say, now that you've been saying you're looking for evidence, let's see whether you'll act or not. So the matter is in court. I hope now he can widen the net. Because we believe that the issue is not only in Parliament.
Also, the iron sheets were in court. Let me come to Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi. Honorable, something you hinted on that really...
Commissioner General, this one is tough. It's for us, not for you.
Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi, I think the biggest challenge that Ugandans see is the Public Finance Management Act. That 3%. We always wait for when the appetite is tickled. When I did the math of 3% of 72 is about 1.5 trillion shillings.
No, it's more than that.
It's okay, a little bit more than that. When we look at this year, this financial year that's coming to an end, we had 3.3, we had 1.1, then about 700. And then when we look at that and look at how it was spent, it's like 72 is made for political reasons to get the 3%.
Yeah.
When you look at this, and most of it is borrowed, this is the concern of Ugandans. How do we end this budget of supplementary?
They are not going to even borrow it. In the year I'm looking at, in the audit process, we had a budget of 52. Actually, within the actual budget, our revenue was 48. From the word go, you were theoretical. And in the report we are doing, which I'm not privileged to reveal to you, we've done a very comparative analysis, trends, 5 years, how we have performed on those figures. So you are not likely to suffer because of those numbers. Because as I've told you, the actual budget, first priority, you are not, is below the table. And it's the one that is going to be financed by his first revenue that will trickle in. It will not even go to statutory, by the way. He is calling this statutory. Bank of Uganda's debt now, where government failed to reimburse, is now about 7 trillion. Yeah, I heard him speak about exports. These are things. Where bank, because Bank of Uganda is the bank for government. When there are statutory obligations on behalf of Uganda, instantly, Bank of Uganda clears. Then it's supposed to raise revenue, then we reimburse. Now the outstanding and reimbursed money has now gone to 70 trillion. You remember the first time I revealed that figure from whistleblower, even Bank of Uganda ran an advert, and on parliamentary floor they lost it. So that's what you are now yielding. 2, you have 10 trillion for people who have supplied government, and you have not paid them. And you are saying those are not statutory obligations. They are payables. They call them payables. Memo items.
We had a meeting with the World Bank in Nairobi, and we discussed and we said some of these things now, by definition and by law, we need to cluster them and make them part of the national debt.
Of the national debt.
Yes.
I have supplied government. Now, you don't pay. Then the other element which you have, and this I'm here with an accounting officer. Every agency in Uganda mischarges and diverts funds. I've looked literally to all, not even his. He's able to run a budget line by line, code by code. Now, what does it mean? Is that most government entities don't stick to the budget. The moment you give them the allocation, they now do a secondary prioritization according to the needs of the institution, and they find money from within. Literally, I was telling friends, if I had my way, I would have sent every accounting officer to CID. Because
to finance and get permission to VIA and give reasons for that.
yeah, they don't.
No, we do.
No, you via either you ask for supplementary.
It.
Yes.
To spend on a different vote,
Yes,
you must
via.
get authorization.
Yeah, you must via, and it is 10%.
Yeah, not more than
expenditure
10%,
line.
yes.
But most agencies don't have that authority. They just do their menyanga and stay. Then you are here. I've encountered hospitals that are spending money on source, and URA is where they are collecting money. They collect from their receipts and bank, and then
what do what?
and then they transfer to the consolidated fund. Yet I've found others where it gives a schedule of the revenues that you have generated and the one that informed the agency that this is the money we collected from you as your NTR. You need to quickly address that. You need maybe technology and the infrastructure to go to every, of course, I've looked at the numbers, Omara.
Yes.
On, for example, I'll tell you an interesting figure from your region. It shocked me. The whole of Lango region, your region, had only 10 people, 10 students that qualified to go on government sponsorship.
Which university?
Across universities.
Ah, okay.
Only 10. And 8 were from one secondary school, which is a private school. And 2 were from another private school. Only 2 schools.
So no government.
That could go on the whole of Lango. And I said, where is Omara? Of course, your children are not in Lango.
In Kampala.
They're educated here in Kampala.
Kampala and London.
Yeah, and London. But the whole of your area,
At least not London.
the whole of your area had only 10. The whole of Lango stretch. The whole of Lango. The whole of West Nile. Eh? The whole of West Nile had 5. On government sponsorship. So, if that's, and I heard him say, that this doctor of economics, say, you know, you need to democratize development. No. California, as a state in the US, contributes to 1/3 of the GDP of US, California. And it can spark growth. When California actually gets a recess, the whole US will suffer. So not every region must develop at the same time. And you want, for example, is it a district in Karamoja had 9 first grades?
In P7 also.
In P7. But then in that district you have taken a policy to build a secondary school in every sub-county. With the district that has got 9 first grades with the 19 sub-counties, you are spending government money to construct a secondary school in the district.
Timothy, with your indulgence again, I hate disrupting my friend here. I would support the professor. We were in Nairobi and we were studying the devolution which happened in Kenya, where now they have the governors, governors running those places. You know, the governors have a single account, the way we have in this, a single treasury account. Single treasury account. The governors have a single treasury account. And then the government, based on a certain criteria, gives them money, more money. Apart from that domestic revenue, they again give them more money. Then they plan for that location. So which means the students there will be able to go to school. They will look at the more students within that locality to go on government schools. Now, if you centralize it, and then you go through the system where, okay, of course people will be disadvantaged. I've just picked education. But also in terms of now focus and local administration, the districts we have is nothing. By the way, Commissioner General, you know, leave alone the money the Uganda Revenue Authority collects. What we call the appropriation in aid, the money that comes from the local government. Look at the numbers, has never been more than 300 billion shillings. In that budget of ours, 300 billion, local government. So you keep us there isolated, we will all die in our districts.
Of course, I have different in what you call local revenue.
Yes.
From the definition.
Local revenue is a factor of the GDP of that place. No,
because you see,
straightforward economics.
Let me tell you, local revenue as defined by him is also debatable. Now, when I have a shop in Gombe,
yes,
selling beer or soda or sugar or soap, okay?
Yeah.
Its revenue, he has collected it at source. Okay? But this revenue is local revenue. In the books of the districts, there is nothing. But this is money bought, you know. People are buying airtime in a car trading center or sending mobile money. Now, for you what you call local revenue, a license from tomato sellers. but my friend, as I go to buy paraffin, to go to buy petrol, to go to buy a soda, and locally in my village, I'm paying revenue. Not so. Why do you call that one and say that one is not local revenue? Is it his revenue from Central? It is revenue generated in Kabong.
Yes.
And that's why for us we are insisting. And you resisted that you needed another formula of sharing revenue. Actual sharing of revenue. We say now, you people at the center, how much money do you, because this will even address the question of corruption. as he collects his money from the consolidated fund, okay, we say this percentage of money he collects goes to local government.
Okay.
And the moment that money goes to the local government, one, and for me, I have even a formula to discipline you politicians. If for matter the people of Butambala were paying for my salary, instead of picking it at the center, and I'm picking it on the district pass,
Yes.
they will not permit me to have the salary I have.
Then you have different MPs earning different.
They will not even demand for MPs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's localize. Let the MPs pick their salary at the district level, and you're going to pick 30 million. You see whether they will demand another MP to pick their money. Because if let them be paid at sub-county. Let's get a formula that I line up.
They'll be paid nothing.
You know, he has gone into activity-based accounting.
No, not activity-based accounting. It's because we are being paid from what they call government. And government is far removed from my mother. He doesn't feel it. Let us localize some of these issues. Let the people of Butambala be the ones going to buy a vehicle, okay, for the chairperson. No. Give them their own money and tell them, now you use this money to buy 200 million or 300 million to a district park. They will not agree. They will not agree when they don't have a road. But once this vehicle is given by government with the red number plate, they will say this is a government vehicle. So for me, some of these things we must change the way we run government. And this will be a revolution. Take it, these decisions. She's the lecturer.
Yeah.
It hurts me. My wife happens to be part of the... But you find a head of a faculty of law does not have a vehicle. Yes. They don't. Guys, they don't. They don't. They have their own personal vehicles. They have their own personal vehicles.
Let me bring in Professor. Professor, and hearing Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi and also hearing Dr. Eli, especially when Dr. Eli coined a new statement that the budget has two elements, the politics and the economics. How is it that corruption is felt to the last mile, and yet the budget has no interest to the last mile?
Wow, that's a difficult one, but thanks. First, I want to conclude on what he had started, that when you actually tell people to spend their own money at source, those studies have been done in this country, and actually no district raises enough money to finance its resources. I think what they raise is like around 5%. So actually the center is giving them, except if URA implements and collects taxes, I don't know how. But even if Butambala, as you say it, does not raise enough money to run its own district budget. He
collects our money.
He takes it.
No,
but
he
no,
collects our money.
even if he left it at source, it's not enough to run your hospitals,
let me tell you,
your schools,
Doctor,
your districts.
I've distributed that. I've told you. When I buy water in Butambala, I've paid tax.
Yeah.
When I buy a matchbox, I've paid tax. When I buy sugar, but this tax is collected by him and put in the coffers of Bank of Uganda, where these people access it and steal it.
Okay, that will be a debate for another day.
That's right. For your definition,
bring back the two of them.
For you, your definition of local revenue is not informed by reality. Is that the people, by the way, the people of Butambala, if you collect their consumption level, and you are running a consumption tax, okay, they pay enough to run a district.
We shall have another debate on
Let's
that.
have Professor, the trickle down of corruption versus the budget.
And it is
okay. Yeah, thank you very much. Honorable, I think thank you very much. You'll have a debate of the two of you on who takes whose money. But I think in the present, I think the issue is the trickle down of corruption vis-a-vis the trickle down of the budget. As I already said, you know, the budget is actually trying to trickle down to areas where even not much is raised in terms of real terms, okay? And as we observed that the budget is both political and it is also economic. That's why he, in his submission, said his ideas are revolutionary. And those ideas can actually be revolutionary. Because if we say a district raises money for its MP, one MP will be driving Espacio, and the Kampala MPs will be driving Gazelas. How do you then manage a parliament which has inequity in terms of what they have to work with?
Poor people behave like
But,
that.
but anyway, aside from that, I think one way, of course, I've also...
Gentlemen, let's have Professor.
I've also said here
Why
before,
should we be an MP of poor people? And
Honorable Kivumbi and Honorable Mara.
the two honorables should be sent back to Parliament. I think it's nearby here. I think the two honorables should go to Parliament. It's not very far from here, and we complete our...
Yes, please.
Yeah, but what I was really saying is that the districts, first of all, I've always said corruption is not only at the center. There's actually a lot of corruption in the districts, even at lower level, which also has to be checked, because most times there's not much attention paid to that level. But in terms of trickling down development, vis-a-vis trickling down, I think I would like to look at it as of trickling down development. We have a country, and according to the statistics of 2022, the rural population is 73.84%. Yet we are not talking about investment in these areas. I think the strategy we have picked for agro-industrialization is to build industrial parks. They're in urban areas, so they must move. I think we need to get time and say, how exactly do we invest where the majority of people are? And there are some statistics that were actually comparing the previous budget and the current budget. When you look in the cluster of agro-industrialization, for example, they expect to reduce household dependence on subsistence from 68.9% of this financial year to 55% next financial year. They want to increase the proportion of the labor force transiting into gainful employment from 34% to 55%. They want to reduce hunger from 40% to at least 20%. So there are certain strategies that are very good on paper, which are aspirations of this budget, especially with regard to agro-industrialization, where most of the population is. The question really is in how will this be done? Because the industrial parks are in urban areas, the production and development clusters are in urban areas, there are some in rural areas, but they are scattered. The parish development model, which should have been a vehicle for this, is putting money in individual pockets. I think there is need to say, if most of our people are there, and I don't subscribe to the view that if people are few, we don't give them development. I mean, Botswana did decentralization with no people in rural areas. It would build cities and then transport people there. Because it depends on what, well, we are all looking forward to the U-boss population which is going to come up. What will it give us in terms of that? We are all struggling for land in the center with all this massive land grabbing. But there are some places where people can be expanded to, and they go to there. So I think let us develop the country. But realistically, let us ask the question, how do we develop this rural population? And I've said here before, if a lot of the stones that are making cement are coming from Elgon zone, why are we transporting stones to Namamve or to Kampala? Why not put a factory there? And some people work there, okay? We've seen Hima, for example, move from Hima. It has a branch in Tororo. Simba also has a branch in Tororo. Let us find, why should Riham go to the north and buy mangoes and bring them to Kampala? Why not have a Riham factory in Ugulu? Because in Ugulu there's a season where every household has mangoes, and they all get rotten and there are flies everywhere. So we need to plan strategically and say, where are people located? What do the people need? Not for us, we talk, and as he said, he's disappointed with the allies we talk. Now you, the MPs, should appropriate the budget and say this year we are putting a factory for juice making. If Riham won't put it there, let Uganda government put it there.
Here, do you know the cost of a bunch of matoke at a farm gate?
Yeah, it's around 4,000, 10,000.
What is it in the market?
In the market here, it comes at 8,000 or
No,
14, depending on where we buy. For us, we
And
buy in
do you know the
Karere.
difference?
You buy high end.
Do you know the difference?
Eh?
Do you know the difference?
Yeah,
He takes 1,000 now, 400 per liter of fuel. To transport matoke. Now, the difference, as long as you have a high transport cost, a factory will be near the market, not near the source.
Near the source. But also,
so it will be easier to transport my mangoes to near Kampala than juice from...
Now, Honorable Mwanga
So that's
Chivumbi.
the only reason.
No, Honorable.
Tax policy.
Honorable,
Let's
that
allow
is
Professor
right
finish.
for a liberalized economy.
Yes.
But remember, we are talking about development being both political and economic. It is not only an economic equation. So when you come to settling the political equation, what do you deal with rural areas? Rural areas are not going to be productive. But
People out
if you...
of a rural area.
And then do what? Then you must have services for them in the city.
Feedback so that we can come
People
back
out
to
of
you.
rural area.
Okay.
Don't have a strategy where people stay in rural
let's-
area.
No.
Me, I disagree with that admission.
There is an ideological question of developing rural
The
areas.
economics I want is how do we get Ugandans out of rural areas?
Managing
Not
a
how they
country
stay
is
there.
not only economics,
Okay,
it is also
let's get
politics.
some feedback.
Yes.
I would like to hear from the Commissioner General about the emerging suit around vehicle importation tax, and I see a massive leakage coming there. Dr. Eli is excited on environmental tax because the government will buy him a brand new hybrid car every year. NRM people are seriously disconnected from Ugandans. It's a pity. This is Chivumbi. Good evening, panelists. I'm Alan from Dokolo. It is nice to hear the budget financials, but the problem is corrupt leaders, yet government is heavily taking on loans and its citizens are paying for them. Government should handle corrupt leaders and let us lie low. It's a cost that needs Ugandans to continue to have, but poor roads, drugs stock out from hospitals, this is dangerous. Lastly but not least, thank you, Timothy, for the show. Productive discussion there. I think there's a lot to be done in order to have a credible budget for the country. The technical team in relevant institutions should start being given adequate space to guide on the entire budget process. My advice is the Parliament and the members of Parliament should scrutinize necessary documents that inform the budget formulation. This is Mugenda, a senior economist there. Finally, good evening, Timothy. The lady and the gentleman in the studio, if the debt is what we're struggling to pay, but with its proper use and borrowed well, this country would be in a better place, would live better. The economy wouldn't be the status it's in right now. We need to go through this tough period, but against corruption of all the money that is stolen from the economy. The recovery of stolen money from them. Such people should be found guilty, be banned permanently for holding public offices. This is Godfrey Chakala, who is there. Gentlemen and ladies, I think...
But before,
yes,
we need to hear about this revenue man. You know, I was looking at the audit, and I was looking at the gold levy, where cases which involves revenue in the courts of law for over a year, for 2 years. And people are not paying taxes in billions of shillings.
Yes.
So the judiciary, as it claims for a higher salary, must prioritize revenue generating cases.
Okay.
I've looked at the mineral and gold and fishing. We are not getting any money because some people go to courts and get an injunction. Just an injunction. And it's not vacated for 2 years. And they run away with billions of shillings. And then the judges
Honorable
say,
Chivumbi, we have to call it a night right now. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Some questions.
We're going to have another discussion on this because gentlemen and ladies, thank you very much. We really appreciate the production team that has been able to make today possible. We really appreciate you. And we'll end it this way. A small leak can lead to a great ship sinking. Good morning.
UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Get ready, Uganda, this June the 13th. Join us for a pivotal moment in our nation's future. UBC TV will present the live coverage of the 72.136 trillion shillings national budget reading for the fiscal year 2024-2025. Under the theme, Full Monetization of Uganda's Economy through Commercial Agriculture, Industrialization, Expanding and Broadening Services, Digital Transformation and Market Access. Witness as our leaders outline the financial blueprint that will shape our economy and drive development in every corner of Uganda. From infrastructure to education, health to innovation, see how